And welcome to Tibettv panel discussion. We are hosting researchers from Tibet Policy Institute of Central Tibetan Administration to talk about their research work over the years. And as a part of this program, we have here with us Mr. Tempa Gyaltsen Zamlha, who's going to talk about the causes of increasing natural disaster in Tibet. Tempa currently heads the Environment and Development Desk of the Tibet Policy Institute, and he has written numerous articles concerning the environmental issues in Tibet. And some of his articles are China's new environment protection law, not for Tibet, poisoning Tibetan rivers, why is it not so normal? And recently, increasing natural disaster in Tibet and looking at the possible causes. Welcome to our program, Tempa.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Tempa, so since last year, we have seen a lot of natural catastrophe happening in Tibet, and such as massive landslides and floods, and even tornadoes were seen in Lhasa, right? So can you point out or can you tell us in brief what are the major places where the natural disaster happened so far?
That's right. 2016 has been unprecedented in Tibetan history when it comes to natural disasters. And as a researcher, we were surprised to see so many disasters occurred within the 2 months period during the 2 months of summer. And for example, in 2016, we saw glacier avalanche in the Ngaru region, which killed around 150 cattle and sheep, and also a few people died during that avalanche. And also there was a mud flood in Amdo region of Tibet during the month of July. And again, in the same month, there were droughts in north central regions of Tibet, places like Chumalep and Mate. This Chumalep and Mate are regions where most of the Tibetan rivers originate from, and seeing drought in those areas was a surprise to us. And also we saw floods in the places like Amdolarang and Sanchu due to heavy rainfall. So those were the places where we saw natural disasters in 2016. And that's when we wrote an article called Natural Disasters in Tibet, Is It the New Normal? And that's when we, as a researcher, thought maybe this might going to become the new normal in Tibet. And then 2017, we saw greater number of natural disasters with more extreme patterns. So for example, there was a flood in Rungtak, which is in the eastern part of Kham, in the month of June. And in the same month, there was another flood in Sokzong, which is in the western part of the Kham region of Tibet. And there were 2 more floods in Dege, in Kham, and Jomda in Kham. And Jomda, the flood in Jomda was much more severe than other places, which saw collapse of buildings and flooded roads, and also loss of life. And
this all within the period of 1 month?
Yeah,
right?
within the period of 2 months, during the 2 summer months, June and July. And that's when it was confirmed in our understanding that natural disasters are becoming new normal in Tibet. And that's when we wrote the article, Increasing Natural Disasters in Tibet, looking at the possible causes. That's what your interview right now is based on. And also there was a surprise to us, was a tornado occurred in the Nakchu region of Tibet.
Okay, and Tempa, you're calling it the natural disaster, and this that happened in Tibet, a new normal, is actually terrifying and sad also, because natural disaster normally doesn't come knocking at your door, right? It surprises you at any time. So can you tell us what are the leading factors that put into actually causes all these landslides and floods and even tornadoes in Tibet?
So when we noticed increasing cases of natural disaster in Tibet, me personally thought this is going to be very serious, and this is going to have a serious impact on Tibet and Tibetan people. So that's when I started to do a research on this. And as per my own understanding from a brief research that I did, I could categorize the factors into 5 main causes. And of course, there could be many other factors if you do a greater research. But as per my understanding, there were 5 causes, and number 1 cause is climate change. There's no doubt about that. That's the primary cause of all the natural disasters in Tibet. And that kind of exacerbated by other factors such as rapid urbanization, which is happening in Tibet, and also poor construction of homes and houses and roads and other development works, and also location and topography of the places, the village, where the location of the villages or the towns or cities. And finally, the lack of adaptation was the number 5 in the factor. So those were the factors that led to the natural disasters. So if I am to give you a more detailed explanation on each of the factors, the number 1 is, of course, the climate change. The climate change has been a serious issue in Tibet, and it's proven from the scientific research papers. There were numerous research papers that came out in recent years. And there were two phenomena that, as a result of climate change in Tibet. And number 1 is increasing temperature, rise of temperature on the Tibet Plateau. And number 2 is increasing precipitation or rainfall on the Tibet Plateau. These were the 2 reasons that caused many of the natural disasters. And for example, increasing temperature rise on the Tibet Plateau. Tibetan Plateau, the temperature rise on the Tibet Plateau is twice more than global average, and it has been increasing since 1950s. So there has been consecutive rise of temperature on the plateau, which has led to rapid glacial retreat, permafrost degradation, and that has led to many of the landslides. And then the other issue is increasing precipitation. Since 1950s, there has been increasing rainfall on the plateau. And also one example is the 2016 and 2017 natural disasters. Most of those disasters occurred because of heavy rainfall, especially the 2017 floods were caused by heavy rainfall. So these are the 2 reasons that caused much of the natural disasters as a result of climate change. Then number 2 is the rapid urbanization. Rapid urbanization has, in a way, exacerbated the situation there. And what happened is, since within the last 10 years or so, there has been rapid urbanization in Tibet, which is in a way good for the economy of Tibet. But then it has caused ecological problems. And Tibet is very fragile, and the plateau can sustain only certain amount or certain number of homes or the population. But urbanization has gone at such a pace that it was unsustainable, and it caused overcrowding and also building of homes on steep slopes or increased congestion of homes. And also many of the homes were built on the river banks because of the rapid urbanization. And for example, the natural disaster that happened in Jomda, and it was due to, again, rapid urbanization. And many of the homes in Jomda town were actually built on the river bank. So when the river surged, they washed away the homes. So that's one case where the rapid urbanization has caused some of the disasters. And also another issue is the, poor construction homes. And in the past, Tibet received very little rainfall. Tibet Plateau is a plateau with low temperature and also low precipitation. So that's how the homes were built. So if you travel across Tibet, you see mud walls, homes being built with mud walls or flat roofs and also open roofs. That's because Tibet received very little rainfall, number 1. Number 2, it's a place with very low temperature. So the homes were built in such a way to receive maximum sunlight. And also homes were built to withstand cold, wind. But homes were never built to withstand heavy rainfall because there were no rainfall, very little rainfall in the past. But now there's increasing rainfall, which means the mud homes are not able to withstand the new scenario or the new conditions. So that's what caused many of the homes to collapse in the regions, many parts of the camp, because many areas in the camp, especially in Dege and Jomda, homes were built with mud walls and wooden structures, so which were easily washed away by heavy rainfall or floods. That was one of the causes. And then number 4 is location or the topography. That's the serious issue. There are hundreds of mountains and thousands of rivers across Tibet. So every home or village that we see in Tibet are either located on a riverbank or in a steep or on a narrow valley or on a slope, steep slope. So what happens is now, in the past it was fine because, again, as I said earlier, homes were built to receive maximum sunlight. So the homes which were built on the steep slopes faces south or east to get maximum sunlight. And also homes were built near riverbank because normally most of the civilization actually occurred on the riverbank. And also homes were built in a steep valley, a narrow valley is to protect itself from cold winds. But now that there's increased rainfall, again, it becomes a problem. Because when there's heavy rainfall and also melting of permafrost or loosening of frozen soil, steeps kind of slide down, and that causes a landslide, and that brings down the whole village that's located on a steep slope. And also places in many places in the Amdo region, which places with very little vegetation, and the homes located on the slopes of the mountains. Again, when there's a heavy rainfall, it causes a mud flood, and that again causes a problem for the village and the towns. And the last and the final factor is the lack of adaptation. This is the most serious issue, and climate change is not an issue that's occurring only in Tibet. Climate change is an issue that is affecting people or country across the globe, and it's a global issue. But the problem in Tibet is there's lack of adaptation, lack of knowledge about the climate change, and that's a serious issue. So if there's no adaptation, then there's a serious issue, because if you are not able to adapt to the new climatic condition, then you have to confront it. So when you confront climatic conditions, there's no, that causes a lot of destruction. So in the past, despite Tibet being so cold, and also Tibet has a very harsh climatic condition with the steep terrain, but still we were able to survive, and not only survive but prospered. That's because we, in the past, Tibetans adapt to the new climatic conditions. Sometimes we shifted from nomadic life to farming, and sometimes we shifted from farming back into nomadic life. That's because we adapted to the new climate condition. So it's time we need to adapt, and for that we need to get knowledge about, awareness about the climatic conditions. Those were the 5 factors that led to the increase in natural disasters, as per my understanding.
Okay, and you have also mentioned about the tornadoes that have been seen in Tibet, especially in Lhasa in July 1st, right? And when we see the tornadoes or pictures or videos appearing from Tibet, it does look like a coming out from movie, but it's not. It's reality, right? It did happen there, and it was hovering over the sky in the Tibet. It looks horrifying as well. So, can you explain more about that, and what are the impacts or what it can do to the people there?
Yeah, the occurrence of tornado was again a surprise to us, especially to our researcher, because this is not something that happens very often on a plateau like Tibet. And tornadoes happen on a low-lying area like the United States, or also the southern regions like South America or other regions, but not number one in a northern region like Tibet, and number 2 a plateau like Tibet with a very cold climate condition. So So the occurrence of a tornado is a clear indication of rising temperature on the plateau. Fortunately, the tornado that happened in Tibet, actually the tornado tail of the tornado didn't touch down the ground. Had it touched down, it could have caused a lot of damage. Fortunately, it kind of dissipated as it rose up into the atmosphere.
But there's a possible danger in future that it might
absolutely
be bigger and it might bring more like destruction as well, right?
Definitely, there could be more such tornadoes occurring in the future, and also with increasing urbanization, the possibility of damage also could be greater.
And with all this natural disaster that taking place in Tibet, and we have seen that this year, like you have said, within 2 months, especially in region in Kham, right? And there's like 4 places where there's this massive landslide and floods. So what are they actually doing to stop them? And are they taking any precaution measures to help people to be aware and be prepared?
I think Chinese are very aware of the new climatic condition on the plateau, and also increasing natural disasters on the Tibetan plateau, because there are a lot of research papers being produced by Chinese scientists which clearly indicated the possibility of increasing natural disasters in Tibet in the future. But the problem is, has they done anything on the ground? No. Chinese government has done very little when it comes to making people, the general public, and also the government officials aware of such possibility of such natural disasters. So that's the serious issue. Number 2, Chinese government hasn't provided the necessary logistic or the infrastructure to withstand natural disasters, because they should have done, because there are Chinese scientists who have predicted such natural disasters. So if the government has enough information, then they should have done something to mitigate the possible damage that they have not done. So what they haven't done is they haven't built enough river embankment, because as increased rainfall, it naturally causes surge in rivers across Tibet. So we need to build river embankment to withstand those river surge. Number 1, and number 2, number 3. Also, they're also promising. They also actually promised about opening of different national parks around Tibet, right? Yes. Yeah, that is a positive thing, and we are really happy that Chinese are doing increasing natural park or nature reserves. That's a good welcome sign. But again, how they're implemented is a problem for us. Coming back to the issue is that also the Chinese government haven't educated the government officials on the possible impact of climate change, and that is a serious issue. So if the government officials are not aware of the possible implications, they will not do anything because they don't know what to do. So those are the issues that Chinese government need to do, or they haven't done so far.
And so since the Chinese government haven't done anything much for the natural disaster that took place in Tibet over the time, but what, as a Tibetan in Tibet, can they do best to protect their land, protect their country, and protect their houses from these natural disasters without relying to the Chinese government doing something for them?
Yes, this is very important. This is a very important question. This is one reason on which I based my research as a Tibetan, as a number 1 as a Tibetan, and number 2 as a research fellow working on Tibetan environment. I actually did my research so as to provide some information back into Tibet, how to adapt to the new climatic condition. And what we as a Tibetan need to do is, look, of course Chinese government has to do a lot of things, because right now the Chinese government has occupied Tibet, and as a government that occupied the place, they have the responsibility to provide necessary infrastructure. But since they haven't done it, we Tibetans need to do certain things by ourselves. And if you, as I said earlier, looking back into the history, we have done a lot of adaptation in the past. And the great, glorious Shangjung civilization that prospered because they adapted to the new climate condition. And again, the powerful Tibet kingdom or the empire adapted to the climate condition, they prospered and became very powerful. But then somehow, in the later part of Tibet, in the sense in the 15th or 13th or 15th centuries, we failed to adapt to the new climate condition, and we continue to live the same kind of life that we have been living in the past, and that caused a lot of damage or that caused some problem for the progress of our culture or the economy. So now we need to adapt to a new change, because in the past we adapted from growing millets to growing barley around 3,500 years ago. And then we domesticated yak around 7,000 years ago. This all helped prosper our civilization, our culture on the plateau. So what we need to do, Tibetans need to do is, number one, we need to be aware of the new climate condition. For that, educated Tibetans and the Tibetan lamas and the spiritual leaders, and also Tibetan officials, both in Tibet and in exile, and also everyone, people like you and me or the journalists, need to make Tibetans aware of the new climate condition. That is increasing temperature rise of temperature and also increasing precipitation, rainfall. That's the number one. Number two, we need to change how we live our life. We need to change how we build our homes. We need to move away from building homes on the steep slopes. And we need to move slightly away from the river bank, or we need to build a high river embankment. And also we need to change what we eat and the kind of food we eat, because in the past, the climate condition was such that very few type of vegetation grew on the plateau. So we had to consume only those food products. But now that the Tibet plateau has a great temperature, it's warmer, and also there's more precipitation, there's possibility of growing more variety of vegetation. So we need to change what we plant, adjust to that. So if we do those things, then we not only can adapt to the new climate condition, but we also can prosper, because there are few positive impact from the climate change on the plateau. That is, number one, the rising temperature also brings more pleasant weather condition on the plateau, and also we could grow more variety of vegetation, food product on the plateau, and also we could do much more greater kind of activity that were restricted in the past due to cold climate conditions. So that's what we Tibetans need to do. And the final and most important thing is tree plantation. It's very important. Chinese government has carried out a large-scale afforestation on the plateau, and that's a welcome sign. And we Tibetans need to plant trees. Tree plantation has a lot of positive impacts. One such is it reduces landslide, number one, and also it reduces floods, and also it increases fertility of the soil. And finally, the most important thing is the Tibet plateau in the past might not have a favorable climate condition in certain part of Tibet that could facilitate tree plantation. But now the climate condition is such that we could grow more trees on the plateau. If we are able to do that, then we can reduce the kind of the climate negative impact that the rising temperature will have within the next 10 or 20 years. That can be reduced by planting trees right now. That's what we need to do.
Okay, thank you, Timpa. So with this, we have come to the end of today's program. We have discussed about the causes of increasing natural disaster in Tibet, and we have here with us today Tempa Gyaltsen Zamlha, who is a research fellow at Tibet Policy Institute of Central Tibetan Administration, and Timpa currently heads the Environment and Development Desk at the Tibet Policy Institute. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me here.